Hi, my name is Julia, and this is your weekly portion of art, books, and potentially museums, but today probably not. This video is my wrap-up video of the books that I read in April, and unfortunately I haven't read much because I traveled to Armenia to meet my parents, and obviously I didn't have much time because I was dedicating this time to the family. But also here at the end of the month we went to the Netherlands for a short trip because here in Germany we celebrate the Labor Day on the 1st of May. So as I say, it was a long weekend, so we grabbed this opportunity with our friends and went to see a little bit of the wonderful neighboring country. Unfortunately, again, I haven't had much time to read. That's why my list is very short. So yeah, let's just begin with the book that I read this April is At the Existentialist Cafe, A Freedom Being and Apricot Cocktails by Sarah Bakewell. Yes, this is, as I already told you in TBR, it's a group biography of existentialists of the 20th century and the preceding philosophers who led these great thinkers to develop their ideas in Paris in the second half of the 20th century. It is a great, let's say, basis. It's a great material to write about because, again, we all know the influential works of, for example, Simone de Beauvoir and her Second Sex, or, for example, Sartre and his Nausea, or Albert Camus, for example, whom I personally adore. And what I found really great about this work is that he connected the lives of French existentialists with the lives of German phenomenologists. So basically it's the philosophy that paved the way for the existentialist in France. I actually haven't had this idea of connecting them. I've been always taught about them separately. I mean, obviously, as I already told you, everything is connected in philosophy, but I never thought like how tight this connection, and I enjoyed learning about it. I enjoy seeing familiar names, let's say, and familiar literary works that I've read personally and what I'm going to read certainly in my life, such as, for example, The Second Sex, which this book claims as probably the most influential existentialist literary work, and I really want to read it. I have it actually, I've started, but I dropped it for some reason. Maybe it was too difficult for me to read like translated work from French to English, I don't know. Anyways, I have it on my list. I would love to read it, and At the Existentialist Cafe helped me to understand the historical context, the tension in the relationship between different philosophers, and how they developed throughout the time, or how their political views affected their relationship with each other, which I also found quite interesting. This book I would recommend if you're interested in modern existentialism, the existentialism of the 20th century, although Sarah Bakewell refers to the Kierkegaard, Danish philosopher, who is also believed like the pioneer of European existentialism. I personally love the philosophy of Kierkegaard. I love his Either Or book, for example. It is like, it's so thought-provoking, let's say. You can just read it without any knowledge of philosophy, and you see his thoughts and how they're developing on the pages of this book, and it's just fascinating to see. And each paragraph or each chapter is dedicated to a certain subject, and again, it's just so wonderful. And I think this is the existentialism that I expect to be, and this is the existentialism of like more modern time, maybe closer to our time, and what is important, the after-war time, because as we know, in the second half of the 20th century, the world was recovering after two very influential, devastating wars, and it was very important to, let's say, restore the human morality and just to decide what we need from the world and what is the price of our life, and etc, etc. So again, it's a really nice read, and if you're enjoying this period of history and if you're enjoying reading existentialist literature, you must certainly read this book, and I think you will enjoy it as much as I did. The second book on the list is very short. I read it literally just in one day, and it's The Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. It was such a wonderful read. It was in my comfort zone. It was easy. It was hilarious. It was I don't know, just brilliant. It's simple, laconic, and I like this about it because in this very simple story, Sayaka Murata demonstrates the point of a certain person and how this person should be accepted as well in any types of society, and how this person is actually beneficial to the whole society no matter what these people do. So I don't know, it's the book about the acceptance, it's a book about self-acceptance, it's a book about being persistent of what you like and what you like to do. I really enjoyed it and I can recommend it to everybody, and I also thought that it's actually quite hilarious, and so yeah, I would recommend it to read as soon as you can. So the next book is, well, it was actually quite difficult for me to read. First of all, because it's around 600 pages. Secondly, it took some time, obviously, to finish it. And actually, I finished it just today, although it is already May. Today is the 7th of May, and I'm late with the recording and with the reading. But anyways, I really wanted to finish it, and I did, with the help of audiobook, actually. So I was listening, and sometimes when I, had to do something, maybe like cleaning an apartment or traveling somewhere, I would just, listen a bit of the audiobook and then come back to the hard copy. I've noted a couple of things that I found maybe useful for my own research or for my maybe future videos. So yeah, it is... I would say it is very difficult, not only because it's big, but also because it is about a very difficult subject. So if you notice the title of the book, it's not just Fire in the Belly, it is the life and times of David Wojnarowicz. And the times when he lived was terrifying. So first of all, the beginning of his career, or let's say some of the active stages of his career, took place amidst the plague named AIDS. A lot of people in the New York community where he lived struggled with the disease. Cynthia, the author of this biography, she didn't hesitate to include all the details of the bureaucracy and trials and investigations, because David Wojnarowicz's affiliation with the activism and with his fight against the neglection of people who got AIDS, he got in a lot of troubles. And so those moments where she describes all these bureaucratic problems and trials that David Wojnarowicz was involved in, I wasn't enjoying much. I mean, I understand how important that was to describe that and to document it, and I think for the researchers it's a great actually source of that historical period in New York, but for me personally it was just not that important. For me, it was a joyful experience when I was reading about like his artworks and how some of the most iconic images were created, and I'm sure that you actually know them. For example, this picture was on the cover of U2 album, and U2 actually members helped David Wojnarowicz when he was on the late stages of AIDS. So yeah, they were supporting him. Oh yeah, another moment that I really loved in this book is that I learned about Peter Hujar. So Peter Hujar was the partner for a short time and then the best friend of David Wojnarowicz, and he's actually also one of the greatest photographers of that period, and I'm also sure you know his photos, especially if you reading, because for example this photo is on the cover of The Little Life, and I'm sure that if you're a reader, you know this book and you know this photo and you know this cover. So yeah, but again, Peter Hujar photographed a lot of people that you might know. For example, Susan Sontag. This is like one of my favorite photos. And so yeah, I was enjoying to read about the art community. Kit Haring was also like the friend of David Wojnarowicz. They knew each other. It is a very difficult experience also to read non-fictional books because you know what's the ending. You know that the people who experience AIDS, who got AIDS, they do not usually survive at that time in the 90s and 80s. The whole 500 pages was preparing to that, and then the last 100 pages is just basically description of the person getting worse and worse, and everybody surrounding him like dying of AIDS. I do believe that Cynthia Carr has done such a great job. It is indeed an astonishing work because she collected like so many facts, and obviously the majority of them is based on the diaries of David Wojnarowicz, also on his book, which I actually now really want to read. It is called Close to the Knives. This book actually just reminded me about that I wanted to read the Close to the Knives book. Again, it is a lot of work. Cynthia Carr is a great biographer. The fact that she was a witness of some of the events that she's describing here in this book obviously helps her, but at the same time you can observe how much work she has done, because she collected a lot of, let's say, biographical facts from other, let's say, members of the community. She included a lot of, let's say, side stories. You actually learning not just about David Wojnarowicz himself, as you would, for example, by reading his diaries, but you actually learning about the times of David Wojnarowicz, and that is impressive. So I would definitely recommend it to everybody who is interested in the 70s, 80s, 90s of the New York art scene. If you're interested in the AIDS crisis, if you're interested in, let's say, the history of 20th century or the second half of the 20th century in America, that would be a very, very great source to study and research that subject. So yeah, great appreciation, great respect to Cynthia Carr. Again, it was a bit difficult, that's why I think this month I haven't read much, but yes, I'm glad I did it. It's just my little achievement, let's say, that I did it, and I learned a lot from this book. Another book that I wanted to mention that I really quickly read this month, and it's called the Garnet Bracelet by Alexander Kuprin. So it's one of the staples of the Russian classics. I was reminded about this book this month, and I just wanted to quickly read it. It's a very short novella, so I finished it like literally in a couple of hours, maybe less. And I was reminded that I enjoyed it very much. It was one of my favorite classical works when I was a teenager. First of all, because it was short. Secondly, because it was, about love. And when you're a teenager, this is the only thing you think about, probably. I definitely enjoyed that at that time. So yeah, it was a really nice experience to read this book that I enjoyed as a teenager. And I had this, the slight romantic feelings. And now as let's say, mature woman or person with a mature romantic relationship, it was very interesting to experience this novella again. I would also recommend you to read this book if you interested in romance in classical literature, but also if you want to begin with Russian literature at some point and you don't know where to start and you don't want to begin with War and Peace. Alexander Kuprin wrote a lot of novellas and novels that are relatively simple to read and actually quite interesting to think about it. They raise interesting moral questions or questions of love, for example, and how it is perceived in the society, how we act upon it. So yeah, definitely recommend it. And now to another work of Russian literature, but more contemporary, let's say. It is Guzel Yakhina and her novel Zuleikha. In English it is called Zuleikha, so the name of the character, the name of the main character. However, in Russian it is called Zuleikha Opens Her Eyes. And well, what can I say? It's a great book, great work of literature. I'm surprised that it took me so much time to get to this book and to finally read it, and I enjoyed every page of it. I do believe that Guzel Yakhina is one of the most brightest writers nowadays in contemporary Russia. As far as I remember, her ethnic background is Tatar, so she is from Tatarstan, the Republican Russian Federation, and she writes about Zuleikha, a young woman from the same region who's also Tatar, and she describes her life with the husband who is a very successful peasant in the early Soviet Union. But during the 1930s, the Stalin's politic was very harsh towards these people. They were believed like anti-Soviet, and a lot of them died because of the political reason for actually for no reason. They died for no reason. They were executed or they were like killed by accident. During this process, a lot of people would be deprived of their property and their, let's say, products that they raised, that they produced, would be collected by the Red Army, for example, or special divisions who would collect these materials and bring it to kolkhoz. Kolkhoz is basically collective economy, a collective household where everything is collected and then distributed by the needs of others. And unfortunately, sometimes this division was not fair. But anyways, this is not the subject of the book. The subject of the book is that Zuleikha is the woman, the wife of this very wealthy peasant, and because of mishap, she is sent to the labor camp to Siberia. So this book consists of 4 parts. The first part describes her life, let's say, before this horrible accident. The second part describes her way to Siberia. The third part describes how this, let's say, little community that survived the rough road to Siberia survived in Siberia. And the fourth part is a concluding part that describes, let's say, her legacy and what is happening after this very, very harsh first years in Siberia. I think this is a great example of how we can inherit what Tolstoy did with literature and how he developed, let's say, the historical novels, and how we can actually continue to do that in the same manner and write about periods of time that we never experienced, but we learned about it, for example, during our lives. So this is a really, truly great experience, and if you're a fan of the Russian history, you might find it very interesting. If you're also interested in different ethnic groups in Soviet Union and in Russia, that will be also very informative and educational in some ways, because as the Tatar woman, she knows what she's talking about when she describes Tatar culture, and some moments where she describes religion, for example, on some beliefs. That is obviously very believable because she knows what she's talking about. And I'm glad that this book is written from the perspective of this little Tatar woman and not, let's say, the white man. The only one minor thing that I found in this book is, of course, it's just my perception. I really don't know what happened, but I think is that this book was very shortened during the editorial process. I have this impression that Guzel Yakhina actually had more to say. I had the impression that she described more side characters, just like in Tolstoy's epic novel. I would imagine that she would do the same and then incorporated it in just like one big epic novel about like 1930s and about the life of this strong people in Siberia. However, that was not the case. So she either didn't push enough to actually make it like epic, or maybe her editor said like, no, that's enough, like 400 pages is already a lot, like let's just cut it here and here, just let's preserve the main storyline. She had just a couple of like offshoots of the main storyline, and she explains a couple of lives of the characters that are in the story, but I think she would easily done more. She would easily like write about like other characters who are actually quite important in the main storyline. Yeah, anyways, I really enjoyed it. I would recommend it again to read it if you're interested in contemporary Russian literature. Unfortunately, we might assume with a very good chance that her books will be very soon cancelled in Russia or prohibited even, because Guzel Yakhina expressed her opinion against the war in Ukraine. She despised this idea. I think she correctly understands the essence of nowadays and what is happening right now. So there is no surprise that she's against the war. There's no surprise that her books might be cancelled because she depicts the 1930s in not very flattering way, let's say, for the Red Army or for Stalin. I would not be surprised if her books were cancelled. So yeah, that is it for today. This is all I read this April. Unfortunately, again, this is not a lot, and I'll do my best to actually change that in May. And as I promised, I'm going to read a lot for Asian Readathon, and because it's like really close to my heart and my home, I need to do it. I'm glad to do it, and I hope I will be out of this reading slam very soon. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video, and we'll talk about again books, or maybe art, or maybe both. So yeah, bye.